Greetings, subscribers! Cobra Kai is a YouTube Red series started in 2018, which is a sequel to the Karate Kid movies. After I saw the first few episodes of Cobra Kai, I posted a YouTube video with my initial thoughts, called Cobra Kai is Awful. I think that title is pretty straightforward about my opinion. However, I've now watched all episodes, and today I want to take back what I said. Cobra Kai is by no means an awful show. I don't love it as much as some people, but I should certainly not call it awful. I'd like to explain my opinion in better depth. First off, the 1984 Karate Kid movie really is one of my favorite movies ever, if not my actual favorite. You're probably thinking that's an outrageous statement, but I've already posted a video called A Different Way of Looking at the Karate Kid, in which I go over some of the things I see in that movie which most people don't. I'm not going to repeat it all today, but before you go crazy calling me names about this unusual opinion I have, please first watch that video to understand my reasons. Anyway, let's get started. When I first looked at Cobra Kai, I had a hard time buying that this is where the characters would be 30-something years later. Daniel is a rich owner of a car dealership, and Johnny is a poor man in Reseda working a similar job to what Miyagi once did? At first I saw it as the same actors playing different characters, but then I had to remind myself of a few things. People change with time. It is possible this is where Daniel and Johnny could end up 30-something years later. And also, in the first Karate Kid movie, we don't know enough about Johnny's background. We see how rich Allie's parents are and later see that they want her to be with Johnny. I interpreted that to mean Johnny's parents were friends with Allie's parents, possibly since before Johnny and Allie were even born. But that was just my interpretation. We don't know things like that. All these things the Cobra Kai writers came up with could have been possible. And as the show went on, I felt like I saw both Daniel and Johnny turn into older versions of their character from the original film. So the story was almost like, first we saw these two characters as teenagers, then we saw that 30-something years later they turned out completely different, but then we see them turn back into their old selves, or return to their roots, however you want to put it. And I came to really enjoy a lot of that. Anyway, moving on to another subject, continuity. One issue I still have is when you look at Karate Kid and Karate Kid 3, it's strongly implied that Kreese and Mr. Silver would have put some kind of patent on Cobra Kai. So the idea that Johnny could now just use the name, logo, and tagline all with no permission required is still something I see as a flaw. But that's just one issue. Let's move on. Another problem I've had is that during Season 1, Johnny thinks Kreese is dead. But my question is, why does he think this? Where did he get this idea from? It is true that in Karate Kid Part 3, Kreese sort of faked his own death by having Mr. Silver convince Daniel and Miyagi that Kreese was deceased. But first off, I thought it was only Daniel and Miyagi who were fooled. Second, after Daniel and Miyagi learned the truth, Kreese was there at the All-Valley tournament in the climax. So clearly everyone there knew he was alive. Where did Johnny get this idea Kreese was dead, and why did the All-Valley staff go along with it? Anyway, let's move on to another subject. The tone. Personally, I see the first Karate Kid movie as a much more serious drama than most viewers seem to. There's a few laughs in it, but I really don't see the movie as a comedy. But I need to remind myself that I'm in a minority here. For example, I personally have never seen the line wax on, wax off to be so funny. I see it as a reflection of real life, that very often as we learn the most valuable lessons in life, we are unaware at the time that we're learning anything. Many people will disagree with me, but I really don't think the filmmakers of Karate Kid originally intended it to be funny. However, Cobra Kai is filled with tons of jokes that are clearly intended to be funny. And I'll admit that as the season went on, some of the jokes even made me laugh, although not all of them. But my point is, Cobra Kai is not going for the same tone as the Karate Kid. It is intentionally funny, and I see that as almost being like a parody of itself. But at the same time, I have to remember that the producers are not making Cobra Kai for me personally to be the sole audience member. They're making it for a larger audience, and they're succeeding. A lot of people really like both Karate Kid and Cobra Kai for the comedy they see, amongst other things. But personally, while I must acknowledge I've laughed a few times during the show, there were a lot of jokes which I did not care for. And there's certain characters like Dimitri and Stingray who I feel are solely there for comedy, and I personally could really do without them. But the show does have some other elements which I've really enjoyed. So now let's move on to that final topic. What have I really come to enjoy about this show? Main answer, the basic storyline of some of the characters. I've come to really like the story of Robby Keene. This story that Johnny had an illegitimate teenage son who first went to the LaRusso dealership as an act to lead up to pissing off his father, but along the way slowly grew fond of Daniel. It sort of reminded me in some ways of Donnie Brasco first going undercover for his job, but slowly growing fond of Lefty. Watching Robby start to look up to Daniel as a father figure, and then having Johnny learn about their friendship, firing Johnny up with new rage and anger towards Daniel, it all makes sense. And this whole story that Daniel never had the father-son relationship he wanted with his own son Anthony, and found that relationship in Robby, is in many ways reflective of the way Miyagi never had a kid of his own, but found a father relationship with Daniel. That's been great to watch. Then on the other side, there's the story of Miguel starting off as a kid who gets picked on, but meets a karate teacher, forms a special bond and learns things from him, is obviously very reflective of other aspects from the first movie. I realize this is well written and well done, but in all honesty, this part of Johnny and Miguel's relationship just hasn't really clicked with me the way it has with many other viewers. And the story about Samantha has become more interesting. In Season 1, she was just kind of there as the new Allie Mills for Robby and Miguel to rival over, but as Season 2 went on, we saw her pick up some karate she studies as a child, and she's become a much more interesting character. Alright, listen, I could go on for hours talking about this show and the Karate Kid movies, but that's not what I want to do today. If enough viewers leave comments requesting I make another video in which I further discuss this, then I'll be happy to. But all I really want to do today is acknowledge that when I first saw Cobra Kai, I dismissed it as being plain old awful, and that's really not the case. I may not love everything about the show the way some people do, but the writers and producers have clearly studied the Karate Kid movies very carefully, taken their interpretation, and then really built on the story in some creative ways. And as I've now watched all of Season 1 and 2, I have enjoyed many aspects, and I am curious to watch where they take this show in Season 3. And it's all a heck of a lot more interesting than watching them reboot the story with Jackie Chan and Will Smith's son. Okay, so that's my opinion at this moment in time. But as always, I'd like to hear some feedback from you viewers. Do you agree or disagree with what I've said? Or do you have a question? Or would you like to add anything that you feel I should have included? Please leave it all in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more of my videos, then please feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell. I would love to have you. Thank you.